My name is Flo Fu. I'm a musician, director. I love aviation so much. People started to call me AirFlo. Hi, this is AirFlo at Oshkosh 2024. This year is so special. Look, I'm here. I'm surrounded by Burt Rutan's aircraft. Let me show you around a little bit. And I will show you more.
We're going to find out in the next hour. Well, I came in a Starship and I looked around. There's a Starship. And as some of you know, one of the proposed new designs is a home-built Starship the size of a Cozy Mark IV. It's short takeoff and landing. I'm talking about real short takeoff and landing, not a ground lover like these other canards. And it'll go to 27,000 feet. Above that, you have some FSR requirements you don't want to mess with. And 300 knots coast to coast. And it's a 4-place airplane. So it's a reasonable home build, right? And I've got Williams working on a turboprop engine for it. I want it so perfect to loft that if somebody sees it fly over, they don't know if it's full scale or a home build. I'm serious about that. I want to stay right to the loft, which means the engine's got to fit in there. So anyway, let's get going. Last time. This is an unusual talk for sure. It's enabled because Beechcraft is bankrupt. And that's also enabled because of the gas factor. Now, a lot of you may be thinking about a fart, but gas means give a shit. Because I found that when we get 80, that you don't worry about some things that you used to worry about. You don't worry about offending someone because I'm hard to find. I hide out in North Idaho. I want to point out that all the information that you're going to hear in the next hour are observed very little in Wichita, Kansas, because there wasn't the normal kind of interplay you would think if they go out and have somebody else design an airplane and do flight tests on it. And you're going to find that out. Management. You're going to see how, everybody here know who John Ross is? Yeah. John Ross designed the airfoils for the Starship. The loft was complete. I had picked airfoils, and I went to John and I said, listen, this is a covert program, so don't tell anybody, but I want you to refine the airfoils of the outer wing, of the fuel tank area, and the canard. So John Ross and I occasionally had to go to Beechcraft, and I'll talk to you about that. They call us Burt Rutan. I'm going to talk about changing a Beech Advanced Design department. Every big company has a group, a section called Advanced Design. And as you might suspect, they're the guys in a big company that have the most fun of anybody. Right? I'm going to lay out the challenges, the goals that I put for myself to try to make sure that in every aspect the Starship was better than the King Air. Keep in mind, I knew that was good. Oh, by the way, I didn't start this. Before they got a hold of us and before Scale Composites was even formed, someone at Beech, I think his name is Bill Brown, I'm not sure, is Bill here? Look at the long easy, very easy. Excuse me. Not sure the long easy was out. He liked to look at the very easy. And he made a sketch of an airplane that would have turboprop pusher engines, and there was a canard type. Okay? And when they went to go to the next step of preliminary design, they got really confused. And they realized that since I had done several home builds that were canard types, that I knew how to do the aerodynamics of this. Now I'm talking about stability, and I'm also talking about control. Okay? So they contracted Rutan Aircraft Factory, not Scale. Scale had not been formed yet. They contracted Rutan Aircraft Factory. Now I had one engineer and 4 shop people, and I'm supposed to deal with making something to replace the most profitable airplane that a $1 billion company like Beechcraft did. We talk about some pressure on the shoulders. It was weird. I'm also going to show whether or not we met all of those 9 goals. Airplane that was not full scale. I wanted to build something smaller because my little company of Scale, which was just being founded. By the way, Scale did some design, preliminary design of the Starship before we had a building to work in. We did it at an old abandoned hospital in Mojave. How many here have been in Mojave? How many here can imagine then what an abandoned hospital in Mojave? That's where other than me, it was actually 4 of us got to work on designing. And we obviously didn't want to do a full-scale airplane. That was crazy, bizarre. And so we did the smallest airplane that could use the PT-6 turboprop engine and could validate all the induction issues with that. Exhaust is easy, they just point it at. But induction, there's some fancy stuff that goes on before the engine picks up the outside air. And that had to be part of the research. So we picked 85%. As soon as the full-scale airplane made its first flight, they totally ignored Mojave. They didn't even let us come in and make suggestions on design changes and so on. They just, hey, we got it now, essentially. And what was really weird is none of our team, even though we flew a lot of flying over 3 years of time with that 85% scale, none of my test pilots had ever flown a full-scale airplane. And Robert Sure, what does end up on? What is the NC number? Is it NC?
NC 51.
51.
53, yeah.
Okay, 51 out of 53 starships that were built. He owns it. He also owns enough spare parts to keep the few starships flying for
100 years.
100 years. He paid probably a nickel on the dollar and bought all the spare parts from Beech. Thank you for that. And thank you for the Starship ride on Monday. That was cool.
Anytime.
Putting away the short field performance of the Starship. And I'm going to talk about that in detail. And those of you that know something about canard aerodynamics are going to be shocked. Absolutely shocked. And that is, I'm going to tell you what they should have done to make Starship affordable. They used military job shoppers from the big primes to do the structure on Starship. And they also used the most expensive things for avionics and a whole bunch of stuff. They work developing a full-scale aircraft as if it's okay if it's real expensive. And then that result, they try to sell, after it's certified, they try to sell them, and they have to charge more than buying a business jet that was 80 knots faster. And that's the main reason that they didn't build more than 53 airplanes. We're going to talk about the destruction of our 85%. Okay. This is a busy chart, but in bold are the presidents of Beechcraft during the 7-year time period that the Starship ran. Ed Burns was Beech CEO. I never even met him. 1980, 1983. I never met him because in those days, the Starship program was covert. They didn't want anybody to know that they were taking this horrible risk on developing an unusual aircraft. And you're going to get a real good picture of their aversion to risk by just about the last slide in the presentation today. So he looked at it as a research program that is to learn new stuff about aerodynamics, not a program to build and replace a keyboard. Fan at the time, everybody remembers what Liberatore was, that would build their twin turboprop on propeller. He came on board, and they only allowed him to be president for a year. Linda, are you in the audience? I was hoping to introduce you. I'm going to talk about him. He's a visionary. I had heard that Ed Burns was retiring and Lyndon Blue will be the new president of Beechcraft. And I thought, that's really cool. Lyndon Blue, I worked with him on the airfan program. I worked with him with the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. I worked with him even on home built programs. Lyndon Blue runs the company that does the drones, unmanned things that fly over and use hellfires to kill people on the ground, even though people that fly them are sitting at the desk in Nevada. I gotta tell this story, it's really cool. There's a guy that did a whole Navy career as a fighter pilot. He decided he wanted his life to be more fulfilled, so he did a career as an Air Force pilot. Okay? It's easier to land on a runway than a ship. So, that was kind of a step down on difficulty. He was within a year of being too old to fly military airplanes. Okay? He just had a year left. And he says, I want to really round out my career by I want to fly these drones that go over in Iran and either do reconnaissance or kill people with hellfires and whatever. You're talking about a military airplane, but it's flown from a guy sitting at a desk with a side stick in Nevada. And he did his training on his very first battle mission. In other words, now he's flying it himself. He's not learning how to fly the drone. He's now the pilot of it. So he knew all about being a pilot of airplanes. He did that in the Navy and the Air Force, right? And the drone electronics went tits up and crashed. He had never had an accident in any airplane, and now his first flight as a drone driver crashed. Had to be what we say re-kitted. And he's sitting there at his chair, all simulated, with his hand in his, oh my God, I crashed an airplane. That's going to go on my record. And he thought for a while, and he thought, holy cow. And he yelled, quick, someone call my wife and tell her I'm okay. Beech Starship brought in Jim Walsh after Linda Blue's short term, a visionary that wanted Beech to modernize the full-scale airplane in Wichita. After that, we did no flying for the 85% in Mojave. They knew correctly that their full-scale one was more important data for the certification and production of the Starship. So we were ignored after that time. Well, Jim Walsh got passed over to be president of Raytheon, which is a parent company of Beechcraft. Okay, the big multi-billion-dollar prime aerospace company that owns Beechcraft. And a younger guy than Jim Walsh got that position. Now, Jim Walsh doesn't have a rung in his ladder to climb, right? He can't probably ever be president of a prime, president of a company that sells stock, So Brainerd Holmes, I'll talk to him about him later. Brainerd Holmes was a friend, and Brainerd Holmes, by the way, Brainerd Holmes and Jim Walsh flew the 85% airplane. Of a prime. He's top dog at a big company. So he left, and they brought in, I won't tell his name, but it rhymes with Max Black. Max Black's, his things on his resume that he was most proud of was closing facilities at Lear, closing facilities at Cessna, laying off and firing thousands of people. Such wonderful accomplishments. I'll talk about that somewhat later. But what happened is, at one point, the changes that Blanket made were untenable to me. And I walked into his office as president of Beechcraft without an agenda. I checked with the secretary that he's in today. And I said, Max, you don't want to own us, do you? And he says, no. He says, well, I'm offering to buy the company for the what do you call it, cost. It's the book value. And that's just, it isn't the value of the company based on its future expectations. That's how you buy stock, right? But the value of the company is the accountants look at the numbers and they say it's worth this much. Well, it's not a lot of money. When I got with Jim Walsh and I said, would you like to buy scale? And he says, absolutely. But the problem is, if I buy scale, they won't sell it to me. It would have to be bought by someone else. So someone else happened to be Wata. Wata was a new company called Wata, which is watch us this time around. It didn't even have a typewriter. It didn't have an employees. And I knew that if Wata tried to buy the company and Max Black asked me, well, who's buying it and where do they get their money, then I would have to tell him the truth. And the deal would probably follow through, but he never asked. And Max Black read in the papers, the same time that the public did, that scale had been bought by Jim Walsh. That was kind of a fun day for us. Well, they certified the Starship in the same year that Max Black left Beechcraft. And Beech went bankrupt much later. And then it got bought by Textron. Everybody should know what Textron is. Textron is a company that bought Cessna. And then Textron bought Beechcraft. Not their jet airplanes. That went to different, the Hawker jet and whatever. But their piston and turboprop airplanes were bought by Textron. Now think of it for a minute. For decades, in Wichita, two companies, three, Piper, Cessna, and Beech, always were in competition with each other, trying to do an airplane a little better, spending more money on marketing and so on, trying to beat them. Now, them own you. And for quite a while, Beechcraft airplanes were built by Cessna, or by a company that owned Cessna. I know it doesn't make any sense, I shouldn't have even told you. The program was covert at first, because they wanted, if things didn't go well early, they wanted to never tell the world that they tried to develop a Starship. So John Ross and I would make trips to Beechcraft and business trips And I had to park my car in the management lot around back. John Ross could park in the visitor's lot. They didn't want somebody seeing that Burt Rutan was a Beechcraft. They couldn't show me the production line of the King Air. You know, if I'm working on something to replace the King Air, I ought to spend some time in the production line. No, somebody would say that Burt Rutan's sniffing around King Air. What's going on? It was that big of a secret, even to Beechcraft. Now, Ron's had a plan to take over Beech by military action. And if you read chapter 34 in Burt Rutan's autobiography, you can learn all about that. But I haven't written chapter 34 yet, so stay tuned. Now, when Jim Walsh came in, he looked at advanced design, and he himself, being a visionary, he concluded that his own engineers and designers in advanced design were incompetent to design something future. And you'll see why on almost the last chart, why they were so reluctant, or excuse me, that they were so reluctant to try new stuff. So he took 30 of the 33 engineers out of advanced design. And he decided that advanced design now will for Beechcraft. The fun stuff will be done only in mahogany. Well, that's not really unusual. You know, General Motors has an advanced car design in California somewhere. So, you know, it's not unusual. So, oh, by the way, Andover is a little city close to Wichita where they did the mock-ups and stuff for advanced design. Now, how would the Beech engineers, they obviously learned that, hey, these guys don't have that job anymore. What's going on? They weren't supposed to know. How you can understand how unmotivated they would be when they found that out. Here. Well, there it is. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to read you something that Tom Carr wrote. Well, it's up here on the screen about that subject of motivation of the advanced design folk. Starship program was expensive due to the decisions to tool and build it like a military fighter, with every part being autoclaved and their use of job shoppers and primes. You know, a little clip to hold something had to be autoclaved carbon fiber. It had to have software to drive a computer to trim it. And it had to be inspected like a structural part of the wing, and it had to have certain fiber volume and void content, and had to pass all every little part of the airplane. Okay. That pissed off the Beechcrafters who felt left off. The bottom line, they had to sell the airplane for much more than the turbofans that were 80 to 100 knots faster. Thus, the cruise performance and cost had no positive effect on selling it. Okay, this is an interesting chart. What it talks about is what big managers think about when they run companies. This isn't just about Beechcraft, it's about the industry. At the top, I showed there Lyndon Blue, the visionary, and he was. But again, he was only there a year. And I got a picture of Mr. Black, Max Black, the destroyer. And you'll see later why we call him the destroyer. I couldn't find a picture of him on the internet except the one from an obituary. guess you don't get as famous and well liked if you just lay off thousands of people compared to develop a new exciting product. In general, top management of a company operates to avoid catastrophe, since history will blame them personally for a corporation's failure. This is why a 787 looks like a 707. Right? You try something new, you spend billions on it and it fails, that's on your resume. And this flat won't do that. At Beechcraft, 4 different Beechcraft presidents. I ran scale during that time period, and it had equity changes during that time period, and 1 equity change. But I demanded and I achieved to keep our original culture, to not let ownership of a big company change the culture. And the culture is a lot to do with how we work together as friends and how we work together in this crazy thing that you would bring a spouse to the high desert and say, we gotta live here. In fact, I kept statistics in the home build industry. I'm the one that has a lot of data because we sold like 16,000 sets of plans. And I kept data on how long the spouse would cry after she saw Mojave. And when that, they would continuously cry, you know. And that went so long that we didn't keep track anymore. Large variety interface with many corporations, foreign and domestic, military and billionaires, and all kinds of things. But I was never, ever frightened by taking technical risks. You know why? All we did was research testing. And when you're doing research, you expect that you'll have failures. So there is no reason that I would ever get frightened to try something new, because it's expected that it won't work here and there. When we started working with Beech, all the top management at Raytheon, the top management at Raytheon, which is Burt Rutan, and I'll talk about him later in the talk, and at Beechcraft, Lyndon Blue and Jim Walsh, they were excited about Beech doing a huge upgrade in the product line. There was new configuration, new structure, new avionics. They were excited about that. Later, when Holmes and Walsh were gone, Max Blick was frightened by the huge technical and financial risk. And the reason is there was a lot of money spent trying to certify and produce the Starship. And I'm going to show you why later. But if you spend billions, or a good part of $1 billion doing that, this is in the 80s now, and then you don't get anything out of it, that's also on your resume. And what a Starship would be relative to King. Okay. 1, it had to have a modern look. Well, everybody knows that. Not really. It had to have structure that was light, that handled weathering and fatigue life. In other words, it wasn't gonna, just because you're parking at an airport close to the ocean where you have salt spray. And again, all these aluminum airplanes, after you fly them so long, you can't fly them anymore. bought a Grumman Tiger, which is the longest, the highest time Grumman Tiger ever. Because throughout my experience, I let all my employees fly it essentially for free, because I wanted my designers and I wanted my shop people to fly airplanes. They're a lot better at building them and designing them if they're pilots, right? That airplane now has been flown so much that it's getting close to where it can't be flown again because of its fatigue life. Grumman Tiger. I wanted the safety of the Starship. I'm the expert on that. You know, I did the very big where you can yank pull like stick and it's not going to be hard. You know, I told you earlier in the week how I concentrated on that so much and achieved that the other things I didn't concentrate on in the very big and had a bad safety record. And because of that, I called the very big one, and to this day, I call it an SD. And my wife said, don't you use 4-letter words in Oshkosh talks. But S-H-I-T-T-Y. That's a 6-letter word. So I'm clear. Frank and honest with you, I know it's crazy to even think that, but if they built boomerangs, which have unbelievable safety, where you can lose an engine and you can fly it full as stick, turn sharply into the dead engine with your feet on the floor, not touching the rudder pedals. By the way, that's my best design in demo aviation by far. And compare that to people who have been killed in the Barren by getting the departure too low, and it even has an unrecoverable spin mode. Think of certainly hundreds, maybe thousands over the decades, people that would be alive if they had brought a boomerang instead of a Barren. And you know, that I was always thinking about that. That's why one of my goals is we've got to have as good a safety as possible with the Starship. Cabin size, yeah, it has a step-down aisle. Visibility, yeah, you don't have this big engine where you want to look at where you're going. And noise level, cabin noise level. I wanted it like a business jet, not like a King. And you'll see that later on. I wanted avionic systems to be world class. I didn't have anything to do with what they put on the instrument panel of the Starship, but they put some new stuff on. I'll show you that later. And pilot transition means that the airplane's easy to fly. I wanted to make sure that I didn't put out an airplane that was hard to fly, that requires more training to be safe, that sort of thing. That was a goal. And I wanted the performance, the speed, altitude, climb rate to be better than King Air. That's good or better than the King Air. What? How many were here Monday when we landed in the Starship? Did we come in and touch down close to stall, get reverse and roll less than 1,000 feet? No, we landed almost level and we rolled and we looked like a goddamn business jet. And I'm sorry, Robert, but to me when you take off, it accelerates really good at first. You get a lot of thrust out of those 5-blade propellers. And the extra power they put in to get some more performance or more speed. But my impression is you get to a point where in a king air, now's the time to rotate and get airborne. And we keep going and going and going, and we take off relatively level. Now maybe you do that intentionally, like business jet people do. But I'm going to show you why he doesn't do it intentionally. Each of these 9 goals that I set for the Starship, did we meet them? Goal number 1. Now, it would have worked if I pushed this.
I don't think so. The dialogue wasn't on.
Okay. So it's not my fault. Okay, what is a modern look? What is something that looks good? The airplanes on the top row were kind of the look of airplanes in the 1960s. And only one of those is still being built. Okay? The row of airplanes on the bottom are the look of more recent times. Now, I can't say there's an advantage there because look is in the eyes of the beholder. But I can tell you something that to me was really interesting. Does anybody know what BCA is? Business and Commercial Aviation? Their magazine, which was published in 2003, I'm going to quote it word for word about one of the reasons that they couldn't sell Starships. You ready? From the Starship looked radical, was radical, and therefore was outside the comfort zone of most buyers. Many of these people are creative in their own endeavors. You know, they're creative in their furniture at home, right? But an airplane is not where they go to express their creativity. The Starship's radical appearance turned people off. It wasn't a, quote, normal looking airplane, and that was probably a fundamental problem with it. Well, eyes have different beholders than others. And maybe this didn't work. Space bar. Weathering and fatigue, a big yes here, especially in a salt spray environment. And also the Starship has no fatigue life limits. There isn't a number of hours, Robert, that you fly your airplane where you can't fly it anymore. That's a big advantage over an airplane that has a fatigue problem. The weight, I put a note here, because when they first laid out how to build the wings in Canard, they made a calculation that we'd have a big weight advantage if we did a sandwich of Nomex honeycomb and carbon fiber skins. A sandwich, think of it as pieces that are long and easy to use honeycomb instead of foam, okay, and carbon fiber instead of fiberglass. But anyway, sandwich structure. So we're going to take compression structure in the sandwich. And boy, they laid things out and get a weight estimate and holy, wow, we were really going to have a good weight advantage here. Damage tolerance and what you call beyond visible fringe of damage. For example, you can't see it on the pre-flight, but it's not as strong as it should be and it needs repair. Beyond visible damage. We want to use this device and mounted them so that it was nice and uniform, strained and stressed across the panel. And they push on them and they think, wow, this has got good margins, it's strong enough, and wow, it's light. But if you take a Phillips screwdriver and just poke it in one place across the big pan. Just poke a quarter-inch hole in it. It would fail at only 60 or 65% of the load. Now, instead of backing off and saying, you know, really we ought to put hard spars like airplanes have, not sandwich taking compression. Okay. But they didn't. Well, I thought they should, and I told Walsh, I said, I've really laid out a design. I'm working on something that'll work on big airplanes that has perfect fiber volume and perfect void content in the most important part of a spar, and it's a spar cap. Okay? And he says, well, why don't you build one and we'll test it. Beechcraft did not use tooling that they made for the wings. They made steel tooling. And what happened, the composites didn't heat up fast enough. They would gel too early. They needed a faster rate of heat buildup. And they said, well, the steel tooling won't work. So all this full-scale tooling, they threw it outside. Well, I had them ship it to me. And Scale made a full-scale Starship wing from the fuel tank out to the tip using pull-truded hard spars. I even made a mount for it at the root that would perfectly fit their big static test machine that they use. Box it up, put it in a box, and send it to Wichita. And they never opened the box. Already, Raytheon is starting to beat up on Beech. Wait a minute, you guys are spending this much per month. You better certify this thing real quick, or it's going to be horrible expense. And they ended up with adding plies, and they even put core bond adhesive between the plies. And the skins got so thick that the wings on a Starship have no weight advantage over King Air and aluminum. None. And the damage tolerance is real important because you've got a nose gear that can kick a rock into that skin on the bottom, and you've got putting a toolbox on it. But anyway, properly we don't claim a weight advantage using composites in the wings of the Starship. Oops. Well, they didn't. In the takeoff and landing configuration, when you see a Starship like we landed out there, the canard is swept forward, and it's got these big Fowler flaps in the back so that it balances the pitching moments, okay? In that configuration, which is what you use when you're low altitude, you can take a Starship and go full out stick, put in full rudder, full aileron against, and it won't spin. It won't depart. Holy bananas. That's as safe as a boomerang. In a King Air, if you put those controls in a King Air, you're in a spin. And a spin at low altitude is, you know, you'll be scared the rest of your life. Another thing that's important for safety, a Starship at gross weight will climb single engine with the flaps down. Well, these other airplanes, you get the flaps down, you've got to lose a little altitude and carefully milk the flaps up so you can climb. That's another safety issue. Wind control speed is below the stall speed for all configurations. It doesn't roll over just because you're at high angle of attack. For the cruise configuration, production airplanes have a stick pusher. Why would you put a stick pusher on an airplane that does that? Well, the reason that you do is with this canard swept aft and the flaps up. Okay, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things. One, I'm going to read what Tom Carr says about that. And oh, by the way, the deep stall that it can get into is not like you lose the airplane and it's unrecoverable. Those require a stick pusher, like a DC-9 or something. It needs a stick pusher. Well, the Starship, if you just put the flaps down, it immediately recovers. So it does not have an unrecoverable deep stall. Anyway, of course, big advantage. I don't know if they've tested the King Air like this, but tested it all the way down to the minimum speed with one flap down, one flap up. Does anybody know, have you ever flown a King Air with one wing flap at full and the other wing, they're fully up? Tell me how it flew. Really, I'm trying to find out. I don't know. Okay, Scale did not experience deep stalls during our 85% flight test. So I'm going to read something by Tom Carr. He's the Director of Flight Operations at Beech, and he was the Chief Certification Test Pilot at Beech on Starship. Okay. This is his words. You cannot enter this condition in a Starship inadvertently. What he's talking about, what can put it into a deep stall. Period. You cannot get it. He actually wrote out the word period. To get into this condition, you had to be at FCG, gear up, flaps up, canard swept, stick on the aft stop, and fully cross-controlled for more than 15 seconds before it was unrecoverable just by putting the stick forward. And remember, put flaps down, it recovers. All the while, it is rolling and yawing with a slight pitch buck as the angle of attack ratchets its way up. In our test, we deployed the flaps to recover, but Raytheon didn't want us to take the schedule hit for installing an anti-spin pressure parachute, and I agree that really wasn't needed. There's a popular misconception that the FAA required a stick pusher for this condition. Not really. The FAA said that Raytheon had touted the Starship as an unstallable airplane. That's kind of a challenge if you own one. Well, it's unstallable airplane. And there were few clues to the pilot that a stall was getting to that point. They were worried that people would go out to see if it was indeed unstallable. Now, people don't do that in business class airplanes. They do it on aerobatic airplanes, for God's sakes. Instead of backing off on that claim, Raytheon elected to put a stick pusher in. Never mind that if you ever did this in any other business airplane, you'd be in a spin. Keep in mind, this is an airplane that requires a type rating. You have to have ground and flight training in the airplane before you can even take the type rating check ride. Pilots are expected to know the airplane and its systems and would be taught why there's a pusher and when it's operational. You have to do stalls in the airplane with and without flaps to pass the check ride. On one, you get the pusher. Before you get close to deep stall, you get a stick push. On the other, you won't. There is no stick pusher operation if you got the canard forward and flaps down. Pilots know the pusher doesn't work with flaps down. Now, stick pushers are normally in this is my words, normally in aircraft that cannot be recovered from deep stall, like the DC-9 and some business jets. Back to his words. No, I still want. However, starships will instantly recover by putting a flaps down. Now, Tom says, I'm surprised that flaps down to recover deep stall isn't even mentioned in the pilot's flight manual. About this quite a bit, and I still don't know why it's not in the flight manual. Isn't that weird? I think it's, I don't know. Okay, let's continue for a while here. Did I go back? Okay, cabin size, comfort, visibility, and noise level. I give it a yes, but it wasn't that initially until I talked to Robert. Initially, the Starship was noisier than the King Air, where the boss sits, way in the back. Okay? But they developed what was it called? It was fixed by baggage compartment tuning system. And I don't know how that works, but Bob tells me that it worked to make it quiet in the back. You know, I've flown in the back all the way to Oshkosh and back a couple of times, and it's not noisy back there. So we're going to have to give that a yes. Okay, is it better for King than King Air for crew or passenger ingress? Well, there's a Starship on the left, and this is very much like a business jet. The pilots, without bothering the passengers, you know, the people that bought the airplane, to check the security of the entry door. Right there by there's a closet there too. In other words, they can turn around and check it or get up and double check it. On the King Air, on the right, they're going to walk through everybody in an aisle about this wide to go back and close the door. You don't trust a passenger to close the door on a pressurized airplane. And to operate and check the airspeed door. Okay, avionics system. Well, I'm not going to say much about this because I don't know much about this, but I think Bud Francis was in charge of the planning, and then it's all Collins equipment, isn't it?
Yeah, FMS 850.
Yeah. So this is a true glass cockpit and a flight management system, but it was put in the Starship at a time when even airliners or business jets didn't have it. Gotta give it a yes. I flew it after my test pilots had flown it, and after we had done some of the tweakings to make it fly better. But early in the program, before we did much tweaking on the airplane, Brainerd Holmes showed up from Raytheon, and we put him in the left seat and let him fly it. Now look at this picture. The right seat doesn't have rudder pedals, and it doesn't have a control column. The fact that we had courage to let somebody who's CEO of Raytheon, who doesn't fly much, to let him get in and fly it, kind of answers that question for you. King Air certified for 35,000 feet, Starship for 41,000. It was nowhere as good as what they advertised at first. Okay. But it still ended up being a little better than the King Air, and a lot better in some respects. The thing that I hate about it is the range is not what it should be. But it is better, so you have to give it a yes. Beech held on to their performance promises in advertising, where they promised what you're going to be buying, while they increased the wetted area of the airplane by 15%. Made it longer, get more seats, did some things to make the airplane certainly draggable, and yet they still claimed that the same numbers. They installed real high horsepower versions of the PT-6. Bob's airplane has a -67A engine, which reduced the range. But you know, the Beach Boys seem to be focused only on maximum speed. They never seem to be focusing on range. And that always puzzled me. When I did the long easy, man, range was everything. I didn't care about speed. If it's slower, you get more flying time, right? You don't like to fly? Most of us like to fly. Pages on this subject. When Dick flew the first flight of the proof of concept 85% airplane, we're all out there watching them take off. We're all out there watching them land. He touched down, and of course we're light. We don't have passengers, and we only have like a third field or something. He rolled 500 feet. 500 feet. That's the military's definition of short takeoff and landing. I know because I was on those VTOL STO programs when I worked at Edwards. 3 months later, we did a flight demonstration in Dallas, and a very short landing that Mike and I did was really evident and noted. They're looking at an airplane that has wonderful short field capability. Unlike the King Air, the Starship, you can put full reverse thrust in it while you're still airborne if you want to slow down a little bit, right? In the King Air, the props are in front of your wing. If you put full reverse in, you get no lift on most of the wing, and the airplane drops to the ground. And it's real embarrassing to break the landing gear. Unlike any other canard designed by me, an important feature of the original Starship made its short field performance independent of its CG position. Other airplanes always have a higher stall speed at forward CG than they do at aft CG. But the King Air had something new, and that was something I was really proud of. Is the trim tabs were only on the ailerons, and when you do this, you're working the canard elevator and the ailerons way back there. So you can put trim tabs only back there. And that means because the minimum speed of the airplane is determined by the maximum lift of the canard. If you go on to the flight line, you can see it on the very end. Here. The Voyager has sparrow string for trim, and the Proteus, which has been to 65,000 feet, had its trim tab well half. Now what that does, if you put a trim tab on the elevator, you ruin the lift of the canard all the way forward. But if you can put it remote from the elevator, okay, then it has only a minor effect on that. So a very easy, very big in Voyager. By the way, the Voyager, you know how they operated the trim on the Voyager? How many of you guys fly model airplanes? You know what NIRODs are? We bought some long ones. That operated that trim tab, and you grab a hold of the yellow part inside and move it with your fingers. That was the trim of the Voyager, because anything we put on, if you throw it up, if it comes down, it's too heavy. Now, some designs, like the very easy, long, easy, solitary Defiant, they get their max lift and speed stability by a camber of the elevators. Pitch trim is a bungee. We have a spring to trim it aft or forward. That's sort of okay for home builds, but when you do a bungee to trim an airplane instead of a trim tab, you reduce the speed stability of the airplane. Okay? Speed stability is what it does as a function of dynamic pressure than as a function of angle of attack. And that's not something we wanted to do in the Starship. It had blended pitch control on both elevators and aft elevators. Ailerons. This is a picture of the 85% scale like we flew the early flight tests. You can tell that by the fact it doesn't have that fence in the aileron. The tip of the canard looked beautiful, nice and smooth, like very easy, gorgeous. By the way, that was one of the most beautiful airplanes we ever built. That's why museums wanted it, really is. And I think it's why Beech never let the public see it. They said they didn't want the public to relate to the 85%. When it was unveiled in Dallas, they had a full-scale cabin mock-up downtown, but they wouldn't let the public get near it when we did the flight demonstration out at Love Field. I think one of the reasons was it was so much prettier than full-scale. Starship, no trim tabs up front, until they later screwed it up by adding pitch trim tabs only on the canard elevator. What? No, they wouldn't do that. No aircraft that I designed ever had conventional trim tabs on the canard elevator. That would destroy the canard lift when you need it most, forward CG and gross weight. CEO Black had huge pressure in that last year of the program because of the cash flow burn. It was clear that this thing was so much more expensive than anyone thought it would be, that his solution to that was, hey, get it certified next week, and then we lay off all of those people and we won't be burning so much cash. That's kind of a simple way of saying it. That I put trim tabs on the canard elevators on the 65% airplane. I said, come on, you guys are stupid. That would ruin the stall speed and runway requirements. Now, they own the airplane and they own the program. I'm being paid. I'm supposed to do whatever they tell me to do, even though it's stupid, right? And to get me to behave, they promised that after they got it certified, and Raytheon was happy the burn rate's down, they would redo it and take them off of the elevator. They would take the trim tabs off of the elevators on the canard. They never did it. The redo would likely have been to use the military aircraft methods to have redundant control. Well, the reason they did it is if you had a linkage fall off for the certifications. Let's say if your push rod in the elevator falls off, you have to be able to fly it back and land it at an acceptable speed using trim only. Real good requirement, okay? Well, there's ways that the military does that. You can find it on a lot of military airplanes. They use a tube inside a tube that's redundant, and they use a bolt that even if you don't put the nut on it, it can't fall out. See what I'm getting at? You can double it. You know, it doesn't take a rocket science. It's not it used to be one. But if you sit in a Starship, if you could open that window, you could reach out and touch the damn elevator. Is it going to be that hard to modify that flight control system? Well, not really, but it would add weeks to the certification program if they made that and then could take the trim tabs off the elevator, right? Well, they were under so much pressure. Oh, by the way, that would have been about a 15-pound weight penalty. The Starship is a shitty design. Since its flaps, canard forward inward, look at the trouble of sweeping the canard and putting flaps down. It makes only a small difference in the minimum speed. Well, pilots like it because you got better visibility and nicer deck angle on final, but it doesn't lower the speed much. Now, why would Burt's got to be a shitty designer. Why would he design a complex flap system that only gives you a handful of knots reduction in speed? Right? Well, duh! If you destroy the minimum speed by destroying the lift of the canard with a trim tab, you shouldn't expect to get any lower speed by putting the flaps in, right? You would get more if you could get to a higher angle attack, but if you got a trim tab on the canard, and you'll see why in a minute, you can't get to an angle attack close to stall. And I don't know, Robert, do you use the flaps all the time when you land your Starship?
I'd say 90% of the time. Sometimes I don't use them just to practice flaps up, but it's like you say, it's only 5 knots difference.
Yeah, 5 knots.
And a little angled attack on the ladder.
Yeah.
So it's not a lot of difference.
Yeah.
It's the view out the window.
Does that really piss you off that you got flaps and they only give you 5 knots?
Yeah, they should.
Did you ever tell them that I am pissed off? And you should have listened to Burt Rutan, you idiot. Okay, so I'm talking about some kind of complex aerodynamical issues here, but the folks in this audience who understand the technology, I'm going to put up a slide that will make you vomit. So get out your barf bags. That's a trim tab for full-up trim. That's close to the trim that you need for forward CG gross weight. Now, what kind of lift are you going to get on your canard if they do that? And even with full-down trim on the Starship trim tabs, it still sits above the cord line. You know, you'd think a full-down trim, that tab would be way down. No. A picture back here of the elevons shows that those don't move when you trim. Okay, now this is a picture of how beautiful, I didn't have a good close-up picture, how beautiful the tip of the canard looked, you know? And to vomit again, look at the lower right. That's the production Starship tip of the canard. It's got that partially shielded horn balance, and it's just ugly as hell, and it's susceptible to icing jamming, sort of. It did get by the certification, but it still makes me vomit. I close my eyes when I get aboard a Starship. Well, why did they have to put a shield of hard balance? Look at an airplane that has a shield of hard balance. In fact, on the Starship, there's unshielded hard balance on the rudders. You know why? Because they elected to put trim tabs on the rudders. When you increase the chord of an elevator, it's a cubic factor of increase in stick forces. So when they put that trim tab on, they got way too much maneuvering force. Right? Nice ailerons, but so to make that balance, they put this piece of shit on the tip. Any place that you see an airplane that has an aerodynamic balance like that, it means that they were chicken to use the proper pivot, and they didn't want to spend the money to move the pivot. So they said, well, all we got to do is take out a saw, and overnight we can build this structure, and it'll be okay. Well, I think when you're developing tomorrow's business airplane, okay is not good enough. It should be friggin' perfect, especially if they spend $500 million. Okay, what would I have done to the Starship to make it so expensive? You'll see airplane, the trim was on that thing that keeps it from having a tail strap if you over-rotate, right? We just moved a rudder on that, and that was a yaw trim. Well, you don't need much yaw trim when you don't have much engine out lateral yaw moments. They thought it was improper to, if you're flying back after an engine failure, to have to use some rudder force. I guess. They never told me that. But I found out later that they put rudder trim tabs on both rudders. Now, if you have a solid, stiff control system link from the left to the right rudder, you only need a tab on one of them, don't you? Well, by putting it on both of them and having a system to keep them both synchronized, which is not a simple system, okay? And if they get out of sync, you lose rudder authority. By doing that, they solved the problem of insufficient cost. And I talked to you about alternate wing structure, the one we did with protrusion spar caps. I would put, by the way, protrusion spar caps were used on the proof of concept demonstrator for the straddle launch. You did a proof of concept demonstrator for a straddle launch, an airplane with 385-foot wingspan, the largest airplane in the world. You did a proof of concept demonstrator for that? And they said, yes. We didn't tell the customer, but it was the White Knight 2 that we did for Richard Branson. It had protrusion spar caps. It was my test of how good protrusion spar caps work for structure. And they work great because you got perfect fiber volume, perfect void content, perfect stiffness, and it's a perfect spar cap, and you don't have to use an autoclave to build your wing. Okay, I'm using probably too much time. How are we doing on time? Beautiful video with music, and there's a camera looking at the back of the B-25. They showed up in Mojave to show us the two airplanes. And by the way, the reason I showed you this is that's the entire population scale composite at the time. We're not a big company. If we have such a short time, I may skip this one. I'm going to skip it because I want to read something. Oh, here's Brainerd Holmes with a parachute on, about to fly to 85%. It didn't have an air stair door. That's a ladder that we used to get on board. The CEO of Raytheon doesn't fly a lot. but we let him fly to 85%. Those airplanes are at Mariana, or were, I think they're all crushed now, aren't they?
Yeah, they're long gone.
Yeah, that picture makes me just sick. Something kind of interesting that I did not know when I did research for this talk. Royal Presty in 1979, long before the Starship, he made a prediction. He said in the year 2000, most general aviation airplanes would be unchanged in airframe and power plants. He felt a new design and materials would not be marketable, and only a few examples would be produced. He predicted what would happen with the Starship in 1979. But the crazy thing about it, the guy that predicted that later became vice president of engineering at Beech Starship, and his job was to lead the development of the all-new Starship. Duh. Okay, real quick, that is a double-edged axe that the guy is cutting the Starship up. 4 museums wanted that airplane. Max Planck never saw that airplane, but he hired a team to destroy it. And this is a cartoon. That's real pictures on the right, but it's a cartoon. If you zoom in, you see me with my hands in my head. You see Dan Craig giving him the finger, and you see somebody else throwing up. But anyway, that's the destruction of the Starship, the prettiest Starship. I think you'll make prettier ones when you do the home-built Starship. But that one was pretty. Okay, what is the same about all these airplanes? Now, this is the point that I want to make about how Beechcraft seems to just avoid doing new things. What's the same about all 6 of these? What's the same about them? Is they have the same upright wing as the 1947 Bonanza. It's built in the city of north of Wichita. They use thicker spars and skins for the bigger airplanes, but that's the same airfoil, same wing for all of those airplanes. Why didn't you know that? You can go out on the flight line to prove it. And I'm not going to tell the joke about Triumph. Okay, now one thing I want to do, and you have to take chances. Aircraft designs in the 70s and 80s were not as solid and vetted as they are today. And today I argue that every airplane I see is just reconstituted designs from the 80s. Analysis methods and technology are not robust enough on any platform in that era, Starship era. Certainly composite certification of composites and process control was not robust in the 80s, as most of the process control is still being proved out then. Yes, Beechcraft embarked on a revolutionary change in design, manufacturing, and certification. Hindsight is 20/20, and obviously it wasn't a success. However, I submit that the lessons learned from Starship formed the essence of subsequent platforms in the aerospace industry, including the Premier and even the 787 and the military program. Yes, commercially, Beechcraft failed, but had they not been acquired by powder companies, instead, aviation purists, designers, pilots, and engineers that could pursue true design change, it might have been a different story. While your article certainly is not complimentary of the design or technology, you don't mention any of the incredible technical lessons learned from Starship that cascaded into various parts of the company, and not including Textron. From an owner-operator perspective, the Starship is a fine airplane. 30 years old, it has not succumbed to many of the medical metal fatigue and corrosion issues of King Air, Citations, Merlins, and other similar aircraft. 30 years later, its systems, including landing gear and other mechanical systems, are easily repairable and supportable in the field. Ask yourself the question, if I bought a similar type of an airplane like the Piaggio in those days, a 500 series Citation, a Piper Cheyenne, where would I be at 30 years of age on that platform? I will submit that the Citation suffers from horrible reliability of its airframe due to corrosion and fatigue. The Piaggio suffers from a terrible supply chain, including landing gear that costs in excess of $200,000 just to overhaul. And the Cheyenne is just a subpar build quality airplane, in my opinion, and as an aerospace engineer mechanic and an ATP. Yes, I'm defending the Starship. I'm defending it because I have 3,000 plus hours in a Starship and continue to successfully operate 2 of them today, 30 years later. However, having worked on the airplane, modified it, upgraded in the field, I'm going to tell you very few aircraft that were made in the last 30 years, much less today. I think this was at least 10 years ago we wrote this. Had the simplicity of design as a Starship today. You want to rig an engine today, send the box in and get a $100,000 bill. You want to fly past 10,000 hours, aging aircraft inspection, and here we come with a bill of $1 million. You want to overhaul your landing gear, special tools, and one of them, OEM, here we come. In fact, spend 95% of my life designing and replacing solutions for obsolescence products on aircraft and repairs to keep older airplanes flying. Why is that? None of these generator designs were optimized, much less the Starship. Textron goes through an amateur build airplanes like new cars. You fly them for 25 hours, you scrap them because they want to sell you a new one. God help if you want to sustain the platform for 30 years long. My point is the Starship was a commercial failure. However, the design lessons learned, the sustainability of platform lessons learned, and the composite manufacturing lessons learned were instrumental for the aerospace industry. If our industry had more risk in its nature, we would design more, fly more, test more, fail more, but most important, we would have learned more. Sounds like Elon Musk, doesn't it? I was familiar with the group. This has been a long.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi.
You're welcome.
Oh my God.
All right.
Oh my God.
Aw.